Need a new one. Hi, I'm Taking Back My Love, and welcome to... Welcome to Talk Horror to Me, the home of all things horror and all things sarcastic. It's time for me to get drunk. I'm already drunk, but it's time for me to get drunker because we're going on a deep dive. This topic has fascinated me for so long, and today we're going to rant about it. But first, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I make videos about horror movies and the wider genre as a whole. I upload about every third mental breakdown, so daily content coming at you. Please consider following my other socials, peek my Insta and my TikTok on screen now, where I just kind of shitpost, as if I don't do that here as well. Enough promo talk. Let's instead talk about the pandemic. Not that one. The pandemic that was sweeping the UK in the 70s, because middle-aged white women really treated this like a pandemic. So today's topic is going to be all about the video nasties. Video nasties is a colloquial term here in the United Kingdom that refers to a number of films, typically low-budget horror movies, but it can encompass any title really. It was basically anything the NVALA, which is the National Viewers and Listeners Association, deemed completely inappropriate for public consumption.
To avoid moral panic, keep repeating. They were only movies. They were only movies. They were only movies.
The Daily Mail decided that our children were all going to grow up as mass murderers. A time of moral panic. These video nasties, as they were called.
It was a phrase coined in the early 80s and was mainly press, social commentators, and various religious groups that were denouncing these films.
Depraved and corrupt were the words that were used which set us on the road in relation to video nasties.
The Daily Mail decided that our children were all going to grow up as mass murderers.
If anyone gets sent to prison for releasing a horror movie, it's preposterous.
And these particular releases managed to receive video distribution because of a loophole in the British Board of Film Classifications legislation at the time. My phone buzzed, but where is my phone? Oh, that's unnerving. I'm gonna have to find it now. Work. Oh no. It's all busy on the day I'm off. Basically, if the films didn't go into review in front of the BBFC, they wouldn't be able to get a theatrical release. But there was no rule saying they couldn't go straight to home video. Hence, the video nasties. And because there was no rating to aim for, these films were completely uncensored. And this, of course, led to the public debate whether these would be intercepted by the youth and whether it would be damaging for them to see. Think of the children, Mary. They might turn into hoodlums. This campaign and the uprising of the video nasty generation was led by Mary fucking Whitehouse, who was obviously a Tory. And the NVALA started full-blown prosecution against those involved in the distribution of these so-called video nasties. And because they were so nice and so helpful, the Director of Public Prosecutions released a list of 72 films they believed violated the Obscene Publications Act of 1959. And then there was a further 82 that they thought were still pretty bad, but you might not get like jail time for distributing them. But it was still like not very of Jesus. And eventually, because of all the outcry and the moral panic, it actually led to British Parliament passing the Video Recordings Act of 1984, which required all of those home releases to actually be reviewed by the BBFC. So if they didn't receive a rating, they weren't getting home distribution either, firmly closing that loophole. So this, of course, imposed a stricter level of censorship, and this translated into every single release because there was this stricter imposition on the home releases. This also translated into cinematic releases. There was even less that they could get away with now. Everyone was overcompensating in the other direction. Several major studio productions were banned as they fell within the scope of legislation designed to control the distribution of these video nasties. Obviously, things were heavily relaxed in later years, and a bunch of these video nasties have since obtained certification, whether it's uncut or with very minimal cuts, like 15 seconds at most is cut out of the film. And then the Video Recordings Act of 84 was repealed in 2009, and a new Video Recordings Act of 2010 was implemented. So we've defined our terms, that's what the video nasties are. Let's get into some of these titles that qualified as video nasties. You won't be surprised, let me tell you. The video nasties were sectioned into 3, in like descending order of severity. So section 3, obscene, slap on the wrist, Jesus doesn't love you right now, don't do it again. Section 2, kinda bad, probably real bad. Mary Whitehouse is personally cursing you and you're going to hell, bad movie. Section 1, imminent death, my kids are already corrupted and they haven't even been born yet kind of film. Of course, I'm not going to delve into every single title. One, I would need to do a lot of supplementary research, and I'm in the throes of a lot of depression right now. So the fact that I'm even functioning enough to film right now, y'all are blessed. But I think it's just mania. I'm also an essential worker right now. And I don't have all this free time to be reviewing and detailing the terrible parts of 150 different movies. So for right now, we're going to discuss the really popular titles from each section. Alright? Commence. First of all, let's look at the heavy hitters in section 3, the least blasphemous of the video nasties. And at first we have Dawn of the Dead.
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill. This situation must be controlled before it's too late. They are multiplying too rapidly.
Dawn of the Dead.
A 1978 indie horror film by George Romero in collaboration with David Argento. This is the second in the series of Romero's Night of the Living Dead series, which I didn't realize was a series. I didn't realize it went Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and then there's like a bunch of other ones as well. I don't think they're like canon, and I don't think they are their whole like universe with the same characters. I just think they are George Romero's zombie movies, if that makes sense. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Dawn of the Dead is very well received by critics. It even spawned a remake that came out in sometime in the 2000s, which I've seen and I really like, as well as this original. It holds 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, and apparently this is the rare case of like sequels, which I wouldn't really call this a sequel. It's just the next zombie film in George Romero's filmography, but apparently it's better than Night of the Living Dead. Not saying I agree, because I don't. Night of the Living Dead is chef's kisses. We're suddenly so pale. I'm literally wearing 80 layers of fake tan. Fuck. Imagine if I hadn't put any fake tan on today. And other important things that didn't need to be mentioned. Okay, where were we? Dawn of the Dead actually did so well, kind of due to word of mouth. It was so shocking and terrifying in its imagery that people were like, hell yeah, I have to see this dead people film. It's a late 70s zombie film, so people were more used to this kind of horror being widely distributed. This was a feature that was just like extra level. And I mean, even Roger Ebert likes it. And if you know anything about Roger Ebert, that is fucking high praise. Although his supplementing commentary to this rating of like that he enjoyed it was that no one said art had to be in good taste. What a backhanded compliment, Roger. We love it. Now, it's a video nasty in section 3 because it did pass for a theatrical release, but there were heavy cuts. And if you've seen this film uncut and then the cut version, you know it was probably upwards of like 10 minutes of footage removed for this approval because it's it'd be gory, son. It'd be fucking gory. It was then passed for video with less cuts in 1989 and even less cuts for a 97 release, and finally got its uncut release in 2003, 25 years after its original release. Up next in section 3, we have the first 2 installments of the Friday the 13th franchise. Jason and Pamela were not loved by the BBFC, and it took a while after these films' original releases for it to be shown in the UK. Friday the 13th's original film had its R-rated version uncut in the US, but it took 7 years before we were allowed that in the UK, and we didn't even get the uncut film until 2003. And then its successor, Friday the 13th Part 2, was allowed in the UK at the same time as the first in 1987, completely uncut. Still took you 6 years, but we were allowed it uncut, rated 18. It was eventually downgraded to an uncut 15 in 2008 when people stopped being fucking nerds. You probably won't be shocked by this next installment. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was refused a cinematic certificate for almost 25 years. TCM carried around this really weird stigma about it long after its release. Probably because it's an early depiction of such graphic violence, but it's graphic perceived violence. Like if you watch it now, you kind of fail to see anything. I mean, anything that's explicitly violent on screen. It's all implied, but the implication of what's going on is what's fucking terrifying. It took until 1999 for the film to be released uncut in the UK. I remember when I first heard about this film, and from the like opening title card, I thought it was real. I thought it was a documentary.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother Franklin.
I thought it was one of those Crime Watch dramatizations rather than a motion picture. Of course, that isn't true, and anyone with half a brain could tell that was true. I was just really young when I first saw it, but I imagine that maybe the NVALA and Mary Whitehouse had that feeling as well. But the difference is yeah, I was maybe 11, not a middle-aged ass Tory bitch. Now we're gonna move up the ladder to section 2. So Pretty Bad would probably not have been a fun time if you were caught distributing these films. Famous video nasty is The Evil Dead. Released in 1981, written and directed by Sam Raimi. Now, the marketing and release of this film was so lucky for the director. Sam Raimi was basically just showing this movie he had made to anyone who would watch it, kind of in the hopes that they might know someone in the industry and could get it wider distribution, because he had put all of his money into making it. He needed someone else to distribute it for him. And he happened across Irvin Shapiro, who thought, this fucking weird film's got some potential. He was responsible from changing its name to its working title, which was Book of the Dead, to Evil Dead. And Shapiro was a founder of the Cannes Film Festival. He allowed Sam to screen his film kind of out of the competition just so it would be seen. Who else was in attendance but fucking Stephen King? He went fucking nuts for this film. Cites it as a favourite horror movie of his still to this day. So, of course, he found it worldwide distribution. A particular UK distributor really liked the film. He saw the comments and the praise from King and really took an interest in getting this film released in the UK, as he knew at the time of its original release that was going to be a fucking tall order. But he worked, and he kind of worked at it, and finally got it released in 1990. But that came along with 2 minutes of cuts, and those cuts weren't re-added into the film until 2001. Another one of Stephen King's favourite films, as well as a video nasty in section 2, is The Toolbox Murders. You have a very specific niche, Dr. King. Dr. King? You have a very specific niche, Mr. King. I'll give you that. It's a 1978 slasher film that centres around a violent series of murders in LA. The film was marketed as a true story, but I'm unsure how accurate that is and how vague of a true story recollection it really is. Because any serial killer movie you can just say is based on a true story, because you could just vaguely cite that it's kind of similar to the murders of XYZ, I don't know, Richard Ramirez, John Wayne Gacy, and Ted Bundy. Just pick a murder, kind of compare it to them, and you've got yourself a true serial killer horror movie. If you're not specific, you don't have to explain yourself. Flawless logic. It was completely banned in its early release, and then received a certification in 2000, along with 1 minute and 46 seconds cut. Didn't get its uncut release until 2017. This is a fun fact, and it's kind of an honourable mention because it's not really a video nasty. Clockwork Orange is often believed to be a video nasty, and that makes fucking sense because if you've seen that film, Woo Nelly, Sweet Neptune, that's a fucking video nasty. It's regularly cited in this discussion, but no, Stanley Kubrick actually withdrew Clockwork Orange himself. Upon the advice of authorities, completely just took his film out of the race. He had received death threats. The British press were trying to paint the film as being responsible for similar life violence, and it wasn't until after Kubrick's death that it was released uncut in cinemas in the UK in the year 2000, so 27 years after its release. This is also something to kind of mention along the same vein. There was a film withdrew from the UK market in 1992. It was called Mikey, and it was an American slasher film about a young boy who was adopted by a couple, and the young boy turns out to be a serial killer and a psychopath. This was due to be released in the UK in 1992, but was not released subsequent to the violent and horrific murder of James Bulger. I've touched on this case before in my True Crime at Christmas series. It's not a case I will ever cover. James was a 2-year-old baby who was murdered by 2 10-year-old boys. With that event happening in real life, the BBFC and all of those involved decided that Mikey was completely inappropriate to come out at the same time. It's actually still banned. I think it's a slip through the cracks situation. It was a really rough time in the UK. It was really hard for people knowing that kids themselves could be like that. And the subsequent case of the 2 boys who murdered James Bulger is still in the public eye now, because as much as we don't know the identities of the boys, we tend to find out when they go in and out of prison. It's only one of them that's reoffended and is kind of taken this into his adulthood. I think it's just a really taboo subject, and with Mikey set to be released around the same time, it's kind of shrouded in that dark atmosphere. So I don't think it'll ever be reclassified, and I understand why. We're at the top now. We're at section 1 and the prosecuted films. We're going to start with Cannibal Holocaust, mostly because I watched it recently.
Four young and fearless Americans, children of the space age, armed with cameras, microphones, and curiosity. 4 youngsters who never came back. Are they still alive? And if so, where are they?
Oh, good Lord. It's unbelievable. It's horrible.
I hate it. I don't like it. And I think it's massively gratuitous, and I hate every single damn character in that film. They are all garbage, and they all deserve bad things to happen to them. This didn't receive a certification in the UK until 2001, over 20 years after its release, and had 6 minutes of cuts, which is quite a heavy amount of cuts. There are multiple scenes of real animals being murdered and being tortured on screen for the viewing pleasure of the audience. There's also very disturbing rape scenes and the torturous death of indigenous people throughout the film. In 2011, these cuts were reduced to 15 seconds, and one scene of animal cruelty, just, you could throw one in there for good measure, apparently. It's gross though, because those were real animals tortured to death, and we're all just watching like, No. Of course, there are the famous accusations that this was a straight up snuff film. Like, the human beings who died in that film actually died. Like they died and you put it on film. And of course that wasn't the case. But I can't deny that these were some fucking dope practical effects. There's an impalement scene of an indigenous woman that is just so graphic and unwavering in its depiction. It's actually really, really unsettling how real that looks. And when the obscenity charges came out, the director and the practical effects artist had to show them how they did that impalement scene. Like, there's no way that you did this practically. So either that woman is dead or you show me how you did that impalement scene. And they had to prove it. They said, like, we did it with like a bike seat and she held the pole in her mouth. Like, it's fake. Like, we promise you, she's still alive. And they went, okay, sick. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. There was a bunch of marketing around this film as well to kind of hype up the realism, which obviously they regretted after the fact. So when the director was brought up of these like actual obscene charges of creating a fucking snuff film, he was brought up on murder charges. He had to get his actors to break their own contracts because they had signed NDAs that they would go and be incognito for a year. So it kind of added to the realism that these were real people who fucking actually died in Cannibal Holocaust. Fucked it there, didn't you, Diodato? I'm gonna just kind of list the animal cruelty depictions in this film, just so you know that these aren't practical effects. These were actual animal death scenes filmed and is on this film's on Amazon Prime. You can just fucking watch it. These were actual animals brutally tortured and murdered for our entertainment. Coati or coati, which is like a little furry mammal that kind of looks like a muskrat, was killed with a knife. A large turtle was decapitated, literally torn limb from limb, and then its shell was ripped apart and like its innards were scooped out. It was particularly graphic and it was no bueno watching that. They hacked a tarantula to death with a machete. They also did the same thing to a boa constrictor. A squirrel monkey was decapitated, and unfortunately this was 2 monkeys because the director didn't like the first shot, so we had to get another monkey and kill another one for the shot. And a pig was shot in the head at point blank range. So fuck this movie. There are so many of these Cannibal Holocaust movies listed in section 1, all cut because of these animal cruelty scenes, and I want them all erased from my mind. Up next is one of my favourite films, I Spit on Your Grave, a revenge film starring Queen Camille Keaton.
I spit on your grave. What you are about to see did happen. This woman will soon cut, chop, break, and burn 5 men beyond recognition.
This film depicts a woman's revenge on the men who brutally sexually assault her. This film didn't receive a UK certification until 2001, which was 23 years after it was initially released. It was subject to 7 minutes and 2 seconds of cuts. Then 2 years later, some of the cuts were re-added, but they were kind of framed differently. So like they would zoom in on certain parts so that other bits were cut out of the frame. Even as recently as 2020 for a new Blu-ray release, it still has 1 minute and 41 seconds cut from it. I love this film. I actually don't mind the remake as well. There was a remake to I Spit on Your Grave that came out sometime in the 2000s, and aside from some dodgy CGI, I actually think it's kind of dope. This is the last film I'm going to talk about, and it's by Daddy of Horror and my beloved Wes Craven. It's Last House on the Left.
To avoid fainting, keep repeating to yourself, it's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie. Just what did happen in the last house on the left?
Released in 1972 and didn't receive its UK certification, with 31 seconds still cut from it until 2002. It was refused release for 30 years, and it was eventually released uncut in 2008. I quite like this remake as well. I'm not mad about it. This was remade in 2009-ish, I think, and you get to see the annoying Becca from Superbad get killed, so you know. It's not all terrible. And those were the video nasties. Obviously, we could have gone way deeper into this, but that would have been boring. I would have had to do a lot of work, which I'm not doing because I'm depressed. And you would have had to listen to a video that probably would have been 8 hours long. So this is the middle ground. And there was cider involved. So who's mad? I'm not mad. I found this phenomenon so fascinating. And it kind of poses the question of moral panic and hysteria, promoting this censorship of art and media consumption. Nowadays, you can pretty much say and show what you like, as long as it doesn't promote hate speech, actual cruelty to animals or living things, and I think that's fair enough. You can do what the fuck you want. I love 2021. Thanks for joining me today on the deep dive, and if there's any other topics that you think would make a good deep dive video, please put them in the comments below and I'll check them out. Make sure to like the video if you've made it this far, and also if you have any other video nasty titles that you are a fan of, drop them in the comments below and we can talk about them. Drop a turtle emoji in the comments. Oh, rest in peace. But that's it for me today, kids, and I'll be back.